Hey guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Secrets to Real Estate Investing. We have with us today a gentleman by the name of Matt Theriault, and he has quite the interesting life story, life experience, and I'm really excited for him to share that with you guys today, to inspire you to take action, to inspire you even when you think it's too hard or you're starting with nothing. He is here to get your mind right and encourage you to get going. So with that, welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Holly. Appreciate it being here.
So glad you're here. Well, why don't you start by giving our listeners your backstory, your background, and how you got started in real estate investing.
Gosh, so with us just having met, you kind of nailed it right there with the intro. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I spent the next 15 years of my life in the music business and did really well for myself. And there was one day where everything just got kind of turned upside down. The whole industry got turned upside down, and it really came down to how people consume music. The advent and the emergence of the digital download came along, and in about 6 months, it put us out of business. And filed bankruptcy. I got divorced. I had lung cancer. No, I didn't have the lung cancer, but it just always makes the story better. No, I kind of say that, and I've never even ever said that before. I was just inspired to say it because as I was sharing this with you, it sounded so cliche. Like I just went and crashed and burned so hard, and everyone's got those stories, but that was my story. And at the age of 34, I ended up bagging groceries. I had just had a 7-figure year the previous year, and I was working for $7 an hour, and that was a very humbling experience, to say the least.
Oh my gosh. What made you even want to go apply for that job? And what did you put on the application? Salary at previous job or whatever? Like how weird. I mean, I wouldn't want to hire you if I was a grocery store manager. Like, if this guy made that much money, no way is he going to stick around.
Right. Let me just say that wasn't my first choice. Probably went through, I don't know, a couple dozen job submissions and interviews before I ended up there. And fortunately, the grocery workers were on strike at the moment, so they really just needed somebody that could fog a mirror, so to speak. And so I was like, I'm your guy. Here I come. And so it actually turned out to be a real blessing in hindsight, because the store manager, because that came out of the music business. That was my plan A. I didn't have a plan B. I had no idea what else I was going to do. And me being 34, this grocery store manager was 34. And so we had that in common. And considering all of my coworkers were 16 years old and 17 years old.
Half your age, yeah.
Right. Well, I needed somebody to talk to. But he had been there since he was 16 himself, so he's only 2 years away from collecting his pension. And he shared with me one day, he said, look what I've done. I'm 2 years away from retirement. I'm going to be 36 years old. I'll collect about 80% of my salary. And along the way, I've been able to purchase this half dozen apartment buildings over here. And he just kind of showed me how the cash flow from his apartment buildings was now exceeding what he was making at his full-time job. And in 2 years, now he's going to have his full pension, or that 80% pension, and the cash flow. And I was just like, wow, okay, I'm here looking around for what's going to be next for me. And that sounds pretty good. And he gave me these words that I've probably repeated at least 1,000 times since. He had said, Matt, if you want your money back, if you want your lifestyle back, you got to really look at real estate, because it's the final frontier where the average person has a legitimate shot at creating real wealth. And at that moment, I didn't know if it was true or not, but it really sounded good. So I decided that's what I would do. I knew I had to learn something had to learn from scratch. So I really just focused on what was going to pay the most. And, I'd done sales before, and I knew how commissions worked. And I was just like, well, if you're going to work for commission, you might as well work for big commissions and houses. That seemed like the right thing. That was my logic. And so I went, and that night I grabbed a bottle of wine, went home and got on the computer, started searching everything real estate, and stumbled upon an aunt that I had. I hadn't seen her in probably 15 years, but she happened to be the #1 real estate agent just 2 cities over. I fired off an email. The next day we had lunch, and I think the next day I was enrolled in real estate school. And so that's how I got here.
So what city was that in?
I was living in Palos Verdes at the time. Okay. And she was in Seal Beach. So just right over the bridge over. San Pedro,
So
yeah.
for those of you that don't know, that's south of Los Angeles in California. And I actually lived in Palos Verdes when I was a young child.
Oh, you
So
did? Okay.
yeah,
We're
Silver
learning
Spur
all kinds of good
Elementary
things about
School.
each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah,
housing prices are high in Palos Verdes compared to the rest of the nation, in case
right.
those of you listening don't know. So the commissions are good, right?
Yes. Yes. And but I went to work down in Seal Beach because those big zeros really scared me in Palos Verdes. Like, you know, I was like, I don't know, is someone's really going to trust me to sell a $2 million house? This is ridiculous. You know, I had no idea what I was doing. So the $600,000-$700,000 houses sound a little bit easier to start. I know that sounds kind of crazy to people across the country, but that was kind of like your blue collar, middle of the road neighborhoods was 600.
Yeah, that's the first time buyer level.
Yeah, yeah. So I went down there and worked with her for a couple years, and I got rookie of the year the first year, did better the next year, and then I was like, you know what? I think I can tackle these $1 million houses. So I moved back home and moved my office back towards where I lived, and was an agent there for a couple years. So where did we go next? There was one day it was a Saturday, and I'd had a really good client. Holly, you're an agent. Yeah, I saw
Yes, I
I see
am.
the Coldwell Banker Award behind you. So I was
Oh, yep. There
yep,
it is.
there it is, right there in the frame. Nice. Congrats, by the way.
Thanks.
There was one Saturday morning I was sitting and I had a client. It was a great client. And you might have clients like this. That's why I asked if you were an agent. But the type of clients that just give you repeat business over and over and over again, they'll just email you purchase agreements. They'll email you listing agreements. And that actually was faxing back then. But they would send those over. And I just loved that client. And there was a Saturday morning, I had a meeting with that client. And it's like 10:30 in the morning. I showed up in my suit and tie. I had all of his documents on my desk ready for his signature. He shows up, I don't know, 20 minutes later or so in jeans and a t-shirt. He signed all of his documents and he took off for the weekend. And there I was, stuck there to hold his house open for the weekend. And I was just thinking about that grocery store manager when he had said, you know, this is where the final frontier is to create real wealth for the average person. I was like, you know what? I think if that's the case, I'm sitting on the wrong side of the desk is how I felt. And so I'd made a commitment, and within 90 days, I was going to have the real estate agents in my office be representing me in my purchases and sales. That was kind of my big shift and where I became a real estate investor.
So still you started in kind of the retail realtor world because that is great money. And then you shifted over to the investor side after that, right?
That's right.
Okay. So where'd you go from there?
All right. Well, there's this little book. I don't know if you've heard of it or not. Not too many people have heard of it, called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, yes. The genesis of every real estate investor, right?
Jeez, I just, when we do our events, I just ask people to raise their hand. I used to ask, raise your hand if you've read the book. I just raise your hand if you have not read the book, and you get the less participation. Anyway, I read that book and I just got introduced to the concept of passive income. I speak English. I can take the word passive and income and put them together. I can kind of figure out what it is, but I never really thought about it as something to do or something to pursue. And the idea of becoming financially independent by just getting your passive income, your monthly passive income to exceed your monthly expenses, that was just a huge shift for me. And the reason I think it was probably so attractive because the world had just spoken to me a few years before and told me what I was worth. They told me I was worthy of bagging groceries. And I was like, I never, ever want to go back there again. So that was really appealing. It wasn't so much the pursuit of wealth and riches and the lifestyle anymore. It was more like I wanted to be independent and just have the option to say no when I wanted to say no. And so I did that. And, in Southern California, it's really difficult to cash flow properties. And, once you do, you put so much money into it, you're almost at a negative ROI anyway. So with this program, I found a really good investing program. It was a national program, and they just 4 times a year, they gave you the opportunity to work with the other students. So I built a lot of relationships nationally. And that's when I was exposed to, oh my gosh, you can buy a house somewhere in this country for $50,000.
Yes.
And I was like, and that thing's going to rent for $750? Let me think. Let me do the quick calculation. Wow, I could get all my money back there in 3 years with those types of deals. And so I started investing out of state. So I'd fly back and forth a couple times a year, and I built my teams and built a small little cash flowing portfolio. I found one investor that had a portfolio of 35 properties in Illinois. And I picked up all of those with seller financing terms. And, in less than 4 years, I had done it. I had gotten my passive income to escape or to exceed my monthly expenses. So I had essentially escaped, right?
Escaped the rat race. Yes.
I did. I was trying not to more cliche at you, but I was restraining. But yeah, that's what happened. And you know what? From there, when your network, your friends and your family and your associates know that just a few years earlier, you were bagging groceries, and now they're like seeing you play golf on a Tuesday. A lot of people started to scratch their head and then wanted to pick my brain, and did a lot of lunches and coffees and how do you do this? And that's just where I kind of recognized, well, maybe I could create a secondary income by actually teaching people how to do it as well. And so fast forward now 12 years from then, I own and operate Epic Real Estate. There's 3 components to our business. We have a done for you solution, a done with you solution, and the how to do it yourself solution. And so we kind of just took our knowledge and our information and kind of just packaged it up in 3 different ways of how we can help people.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking us through the whole journey and how you got to where you are today.
I'm exhausted. Are we done yet?
That's exciting. No, I experienced something similar after my husband and I were having success, and one of my girlfriends came to me and said, "So do you take investors?" And I'm like, yes, I do. Let me go figure out how to do that, but it's interesting when people see that you are having success, you will just naturally attract investor money. And that helps you do more deals. But it's always great if you figure out what you're doing first before you put other people's money, especially friends and family, at risk.
Absolutely.
That's a stressful thing. Anyway, will you tell us about either your first deal or your first exciting deal? And then I'd love to hear about one where maybe you didn't do so well and you learned something. Instead of getting a financial payday, you got like a lesson out of it.
Education out of it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, my first deal was in, I was really fortunate to find a good mentor and a good program. They're not around anymore, but I was really fortunate. I hear most people don't have so much luck that first time around. But I found a good one, and they had this saying inside of the curriculum called move at the speed of instruction. So you had to move faster than your doubts, faster than your disbelief. And they just take it one step at a time, go do it and come back and then check in and we'll take the next step. So that first little strategy, I had very minimal money to work with at that moment. And they said, just drive around town, look for distressed houses, write down the address, and then we'll come back and we're going to contact the seller. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And so I went around, and my first day I was driving down Newport Avenue in Long Beach, and I found a little dilapidated house, and I wrote down the address and brought it back to my mentor. I said, now what? He says, now we're going to find the owner. So we did the title search, found the owner. And I said, now what? He said, now we're going to call him. So we went and we called the owner. And I said, okay, now what? Well, now we're going to submit an offer. And so that's where I stopped. I was like, but I don't have any money. What do you mean? He goes, it doesn't matter. Travel as far as you can see. When you get there, you'll see further, was his big motto. I was like, but I don't have any money. He's like, don't worry about that part. Just submit the offer, get it accepted, get it under contract. So I did, and they got accepted. And I said, okay, now smarty pants, what do we do now? We don't have the money. And so he gave me this little system and kind of just demonstrated, Matt, it's going to be so much easier to find the money. And it's kind of what you just said here, as we were just talking. When people recognize you have a little bit of success, then all of a sudden this investor money comes, crawling out of the woodwork. And it was very much like that. And he had said, but doing it with intent and just being intentional about it. He said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take your deal. I want you to go to this group and this group and this group this week. There's 3 different real estate investing meetings. And this is what you're going to say. And he gave me a very specific framework to work from of what to say. And in the second meeting, someone came up and they said, I'll partner with you. And it was that quick and that easy. And, fortunately, that was one of the deals that went really well. And it was my first deal. So I was like, wow, this is easy peasy. I've been doing this wrong and the hard way for too darn long. And but then it took me about 8 months before I got my next deal.
Do you remember the numbers at all of the first deal? What your purchase price, your ARV? And
Yeah,
was that a flip or was that an
it was a
acquisition?
flip. It was
Okay.
it was a single family residence that had been started the rehab, and I guess the previous investors had fallen. They ran out of money.
That happens. Definitely that happens.
It does. And so it was a single family. It was half torn down, but they had already pulled the plans and the permits from everything with the city to turn it into a fourplex, a big giant 4-unit. And
wow.
that was the big golden, I don't know what they call it, the diamond in the rough, I guess.
Yeah.
Because all the work with the city and all that time consuming work had already been completed. So we bought that for $325, and I think we sold for $750. And for finding the deal, rather than getting a $500 finder's fee, I got like $26,000 out of that. So I think it was like a $200,000 rehab of labor and materials. So it was kind of a big deal. It was fun to just get my education that way and also get a paycheck at the end of the day. And I really didn't have to do anything other than I got the deal under contract. That's where I was able to bring in the value. So.
Right. And for those beginners that are listening, I wouldn't recommend that you buy a deal like that to do on your own. Matt partnered with somebody. He brought the deal to a mentor, first to the mentor that then led you to your partner, the JV guy. And at least I'm assuming it was a guy. Was it a guy or a girl?
It actually was a guy. So good guess.
Mostly guys in this business. Very few of us ladies.
I didn't know you then, Holly. So I was like, okay.
I think you were way ahead of me. My first deal was not a fourplex. It was a little tiny single family in Moreno Valley, California. Mm-hmm. Started much lower than you. Okay. But yeah, if you're a beginner, don't even expect that you can do that on your own, but find someone to partner with that has the experience, because that's a big deal. So, well, that's awesome. It's always great when your first one goes well, because it launches you and excites you to keep going rather than quitting, right?
It does, yes. Yeah.
Not that you seem like a quitter. Not at all.
No, I didn't. I was getting close, because it took me about 8 months before I got my next deal. And I think it works the other way around for a lot of people. They'll work 8 months before they get the first deal, and then it starts to really click.
Right.
For me. But I think the real distinction, though, that I got there that allowed me to do that next deal and every deal since then was understanding, like, one thing that you're saying is, like, as a beginner, don't go out and do this giant thing all by yourself, right? But one thing you can do as a beginner is go out and find deals and get them under contract, and recognize that you probably have more power than the money person in the equation now in hindsight that I look at, because that's really the hardest part of the business, is finding the deal, is to get some discounted real estate under contract. There's no shortage of money in the system for a good deal. And that's kind of been my philosophy all along. And I'd stumbled upon a real estate investor who had 35 properties. Actually, what I was just talking about, the first thing in Illinois, he had 35 properties. He had seen me at all the groups. I was selling other people's stuff and representing other stuff. I was very active, and he just kind of saw me as the wheeler and the dealer guy, doing a lot of faking it till I made it at that moment. But I had fooled him, but he gave me a shot, and he let me have those 35 properties under contract. And then I went out and I wholesaled each one of them individually, as performing cash flowing assets to busy professionals here in Los Angeles and Orange County. And that really just that started everything. That activity really kind of blew the whole business up.
That is awesome. And you really did a great job of taking advantage of the opportunity. Those of us that live in LA and Orange County see housing prices, my neighborhood, it's like $1 million for a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, bread and butter type house. Mm-hmm. And it might rent for $3,000 a month. Those numbers stink compared to other parts of the country. So if you approach, the doctors, the dentists, the lawyers, people with extra money, or even they don't have to be that wealthy, they get excited about buying a lower price home that far exceeds the 1% rule that some of us hear. So great opportunity, depending on where you live in this country. If you live in a high price market like here, the Bay Area, Seattle, there's lots of places that are getting expensive. There's your opportunity. You go find someone or find houses that are cash flowing opportunities, and you network with people. They're going to be all over them. That's going to be good.
I've come to know both coasts as the land of money And then in the middle of the country is the land of cheap property. And if
Yes.
you're the person between those two things, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, you got to put the money in the middle, back in the middle of the country. Yeah,
Right.
investing it.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, if you don't mind, share one of your lesson learning opportunity deals, if you've had any of those that you could
Sure.
say where it didn't go as you expected.
Yeah, there's one that specifically, and there's a few for sure. But you know what? I don't even know if they're deals, and I don't know if I should say this first or the second. But it was when I made the transition, because I'd had up to 300 of these cheap little houses under my control, and I was doing very well. And just that I got really addicted to the passive income, and then learning how to put other people's money to work there, and so we both benefit from that. And it was I could just do it over and over and over again, and it got to a point where a person in one of my markets brought me a property. It was a 14-unit building, and all I had up to this point were single-family residences. And they said, "Hey, I got this building." And I was like, "Well, how hard could it be? It's just 14 houses underneath one roof, right?" And I should have gone back to my original formula of finding that mentor that had done multifamily before, and it just turned out to be another business inside of the business of real estate. And it was something I didn't really, I thought I was smart enough. I thought I was kind of hot stuff at that moment because I'd had all these properties and had a little bit of an ego and went in with a little bit of arrogance, and that really bit me in the butt. And, I held on to that property for probably 6 years, just got rid of it about 6 months ago. And I never, ever made a dime on it. I rehabbed it probably 3 times at least. And it was a real pain in the butt. But I think the big lessons I got from there is, one, get educated before you actually go into something new, even if it's real estate. Like, the different asset classes each have their own little nuances and different idiosyncrasies, I guess. So and they want to go deep before you go wide, because right after that 14-unit building, which was a big mistake, is they brought me a 44 unit and a 50 unit and an 8 unit, a 12 unit. They all had seller financing involved. And so it was all very easy for me to acquire all of those. So now all of a sudden I had, 150 extra units, and feeling really good about myself that I could walk around town and say, "Hey, I own these 150 multifamily units in addition to these 300 houses." And what was the other big lesson there? I don't think the real estate is actually pretty safe. I think it's the people you choose to work with is where the risk is really introduced. If I look back, and I've lost some money in real estate for sure, but it's all been directly or indirectly related to the people involved, whether it was a bad contractor or a bad property manager. I don't think I've ever lost money because of the real estate itself. So the big lesson there, and what we've incorporated into our entire business now, is we conduct as much due diligence on our team members as we do the real estate, and maybe even more on our team members.
That is really interesting and very powerful. I'm glad you said that.
I mean, they got shows about it, To Catch a Contractor. It's like that's a thing out there. There's enough noise out there that they can make a TV show out of it.
Yeah, I can tell you one of the guys that was on that show was one of my contractors who I had fired.
Really? There you go.
Yeah, and then we saw him on that. I'm like, oh, yeah, I had some issues with him too. Not as bad as some people did, apparently. But yeah, very interesting. Well, we're getting near the end of our showtime here. So I'd love to talk for just a couple minutes about our freebie that we're giving away. So can you tell us about the epic lead machine download that we're going to give away on this episode? What is it?
It's an architecture for our lead machine. If you don't have leads and consistent leads, you really don't have a business. So we recognize that pretty early on. And so we put a system in place, or just a framework in place, that we can, launch in any market, and it works consistently. And it's, like I said, it's an architecture, and it's built on 5 principles. One, you got to know your role as a real estate investor. You're not so much an investor, you're more of a problem solver and a marketer, and then you get to do the investing. And so you have to know that part. You have to be able to identify the problems, because if you're not going to find any discounted real estate unless you actually find a property owner that's got a problem, some sort of distress, whether it's financial distress or personal distress, or the property itself is in distress. So you've got to be able to identify those types of problems, because they just don't stand out on the corner and say, yo, I got a problem. You have to be able to find them. And then 3 is you have to know what your solution is. Like, how can you help? Your role as a problem solver, you have to put your solutions together as far as how you're going to attract those people with problems so you can help them. And then the next part is you just got to promote. You have to promote your solution in front of the people that have the problems. And that's how we generate leads. And then eventually you take the 5th step is where you automate the process. So inside of that download, it walks you through that entire thing and how to do that for yourself.
Fantastic. What a great little plan. And it sounds like it's laid out really well, step by step. So great for those of you that are considering jumping into this, or you're in it and you feel like you need a little bit more direction and a plan. So you guys can go download that at hardhatholly.com/96. This is episode number 96. So hardhatholly.com/96. And you can also text hard hat with no spaces in between it, hard hat, all one word, to the number 38470. You text it to 38470, just those 5 digits, text the word hard hat, and I will send you this download as well as our past downloads. So Matt, how do people learn more about you or learn about working with you? Where do they go?
Sure. I guess the easiest place, if you're listening to us right now, then everyone is educated on how to find a podcast. So I've got a podcast, Epic Real Estate Investing. We just started our 9th year. And if you want to go out there and get dirty inside of the investing side of things and buy real estate at a discount, learn how to sell it at a profit, and whether that's long-term or short-term or creating residual income from it, that's what we talk about there each and every week at Epic Real Estate Investing. If you go to epicrealestateinvesting.com, if you dial that in on your phone, it'll open up your iPhone app right to our show.
Very cool. And they can also go to epicrealestate.com for your website, right?
That's the website, right?
Great. Yep. So they can contact you through that site as well. They'd like to learn about working with you and what you have to offer. Cool. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Matt. Why don't you give us your final words of advice, best advice, and we'll leave with some inspiring words from you.
All right. I would say if you can do this one thing one time, you can get to financial independence faster than how 95% of the country is going about it. And that is just to shift your focus from saving piles of cash, shift that focus to creating streams of cash. And it seems like it's a slower route. It's a little boring. It's not nearly as exciting, but it's much faster than a flipping route. And when you do that math, you'll see how that pans out. So that's what I'd say. There's my advice. Shift your focus from saving piles of cash to creating streams of cash, and financial freedom will be yours.
Love it. That's so great. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate you and your valuable time. And listeners, get out there and take some action. Connect with Matt at epicrealestate.com, and can't wait to hear about all your success stories. Thanks for listening. Hey there, thanks for watching the video. Make sure you like it and click subscribe to get notified of more videos. And you can go to hardhatholly.com for a free download on secrets to finding great deals.